Welcome to another deep dive today. And this one is going to be good. You're in for a treat. We're going deep on one of history's most fascinating and, well, terrifying figures, Joseph Stalin.
The man who went from obscurity, just this small Georgian town, to becoming the dictator of a global superpower. I mean, talk about a life of contrasts, full of contradictions and just unexpected turns.
Yeah, and, we're going to try and figure out what exactly happened there, how that even happened. We're going deep into his early years, thanks to Stephen Kotkin's incredible biography, Volume 1. Really trying to understand what shaped the man who would become, well, that brutal dictator.
It's really unbelievable when you think about it.
Yeah, we're not just going to talk dry facts and dates here. We're uncovering those hidden stories, the whispers, the rumors that surrounded his childhood, his family, and the whole complex world of pre-revolutionary Russia.
It's a period of immense change, both for Stalin personally and for Russia as a nation. And you can really see how these forces, these personal and historical currents, start to, converge and shape his path.
So let's start at the beginning. The small town of Gori, Georgia. This is where Stalin, or as he was known then, Sverdlov was born. Imagine, cobblestone streets, the smell of leather from his father Beso's shoemaking workshop. Not exactly the setting for a future dictator, right?
You wouldn't think so. But even Stalin's childhood, it's shrouded in controversy. There are all these conflicting accounts of Beso, his father. Some say he was a skilled craftsman, but then others describe him as, well, a struggling alcoholic, prone to violence.
Right. And then there's, all those whispers about Stalin's parentage. Talk about multiple potential fathers. That's like straight out of a soap opera. What does Kotkin say about all of this?
Well, the rumors about Stalin's real father were pretty widespread, even back then in Gori. Names like Yakov Ignatashvili, a local pub owner and wrestling champion, and Damian Devrashevy, a police officer, were thrown around. There was even gossip about the town priest.
Wow, talk about small-town drama. So how did Beso handle all this speculation?
Not well, it seems. He would reportedly lash out at young Stalin, calling him Kinks, his wife's little bastard. He even tried to strangle Kik at one point, accusing her of infidelity. And he didn't stop at just words either. Beso apparently vandalized Ignatashvili's pub and even attacked Devrashevy.
You have to wonder how all this uncertainty surrounding his family, even his very identity, how that impacted young Stalin. Did it, plant the seeds of paranoia and distrust that would later flourish?
It's hard to say definitively, but it's certainly a fascinating possibility. Now imagine a young Stalin, carrying all of this baggage, entering the Tiflis seminary.
The seminary wasn't that, supposed to set him on the path to becoming a priest.
Mm-hmm.
How did that experience end up shaping him?
Well, the Tiflis seminary was known for its strict, almost suffocating atmosphere. It was a place where rebellion kind of simmered beneath the surface, and it was here that Stalin first encountered Marxist ideas through his mentor, Lado Ketskhoveli.
Ketskhoveli, what kind of influence did he have on Stalin?
Ketskhoveli was a key figure in introducing Stalin to the revolutionary underground. He exposed Stalin to a world beyond the confines of the seminary. A world of secret meetings, radical ideas, and, well, a growing movement against the Tsarist regime.
Now, to really understand the impact of these ideas, we need to, zoom out and look at the state of Russia in the late 19th century. It wasn't exactly a picture of stability and progress, was it?
Not at all. Russia at the time was a fascinating paradox. It was rapidly industrializing, trying to catch up with the great powers of Europe. But it was also a country with vast social and economic disparities.
So it's kind of like a teenager trying to squeeze into clothes that they've outgrown, desperate to fit in with the cool kids, but struggling to keep up.
That's a great analogy. And Russia's elites were acutely aware of their shortcomings, lagging behind in literacy, living standards, you name it. They were trying to modernize, but still clinging to, well, an outdated autocratic system.
Talk about a recipe for disaster. So who are the key players trying to hold this creaking empire together?
Well, there were some fascinating figures at the helm. One was Pyotr Durnovo, the director of police.
Durnovo, wasn't he known for his harsh methods?
Oh, he was a tough, uncompromising figure who believed in crushing dissent through, I guess you could say, a combination of brute force and, cunning political maneuvering. He wasn't afraid to get his hands dirty, so to speak.
Right. It sounds like a man who ruled through fear. Was anyone trying a different approach?
Well, Pyotr Stalin, the prime minister, was trying to reform Russia from the top down. He saw the need for modernization, but also wanted to preserve the Tsar's authority.
So a reformer, but not a revolutionary, trying to walk that tightrope between progress and tradition.
Exactly. He attempted to balance modernization with, authoritarian rule, but it was a delicate balancing act, especially with growing social unrest and the looming threat of external enemies.
Speaking of external enemies, wasn't Russia humiliated by Japan in 1905?
They were utterly defeated. The Japanese victory sent shockwaves through the Russian establishment. It really exposed the weaknesses of the Tsarist regime, for all to see, and further fueled the flames of discontent. And, Japan was just one piece of the puzzle. The rise of a unified Germany was a far greater concern for Russia.
It must have felt like the walls were closing in. So with all this turmoil, where does Stalin fit into the picture in the lead up to the revolution?
He's still in Georgia at this point, deeply involved in the revolutionary underground. He's organizing strikes, distributing propaganda, even engaging in bank robberies to fund the movement. See, even at this early stage, Stalin wasn't just passively absorbing Marxist ideas. He was putting them into practice, demonstrating a willingness to take risks and operate outside the law.
He was getting his hands dirty, learning the ropes of revolutionary activity. But what about the Tsarist secret police, the Okhranka? Weren't they notorious for their methods?
Oh, absolutely. The Okhranka were masters of surveillance and infiltration. They used fingerprinting, agents provocateurs, even assassinations to maintain control. They were really deeply embedded in Russian society, creating a climate of, suspicion and paranoia.
It sounds like something out of a spy novel. But, their effectiveness couldn't mask the deeper problems within the Tsarist system, could it?
No. And one man predicted its downfall with chilling accuracy, Pyotr Chernovo, the tough police director we talked about earlier.
What did he see that others missed?
He saw that war with Germany would be Russia's undoing. He predicted defeat, followed by social upheaval and revolution. And as history would prove, he was absolutely right.
So Chernovo predicted it, and sure enough, World War I breaks out. And of course, Russia gets dragged into the conflict. I can't imagine it was pretty.
Oh, it was a disaster. Russia was totally ill-prepared for a modern war on that scale. I mean, the economy was crumbling, food shortages were just rampant, and the army just suffered defeat after defeat.
Yeah.
Public faith in the Tsar, in the whole system, really, was shattered.
And this is, where things really start to unravel, right?
Exactly. The July Days Uprising in 1917 was a crucial turning point. It showed how fragile the provisional government really was, and the growing strength of the Bolsheviks. They were really capitalizing on all the chaos and discontent.
And then enter Lenin, returning from exile. Talk about perfect timing.
Oh, his arrival was a game changer. He just injected this radical energy into the revolutionary movement. He was calling for, an immediate seizure of power.
Can you imagine that scene? Lenin, back in Russia after all those years abroad, rallying the masses with his fiery speeches. It's like a rock star entrance.
It was electric. And just a few months later, the Bolsheviks, led by Lenin, they staged their coup, overthrew the provisional government, and, ushered in a whole new era, October 1917.
So the Bolsheviks are in control, but then what? I mean, running a revolution is one thing, but governing a vast country like that in turmoil, that's a whole other challenge.
You're absolutely right. They faced a monumental task, a crumbling economy. The Civil War was raging on, and then the disintegration of the Russian Empire itself. Think of it like trying to rebuild a house while it's still on fire.
So where was Stalin during all of this? What role did he play in this new revolutionary order?
He's appointed People's Commissar for Nationality as a critical role, really, considering the empire is, falling apart, and all these national independence movements are popping up everywhere.
So he's basically dealing with the messy breakup of the empire. Sounds like a pretty tough job.
It was chaotic, to say the least. He's thrust into this whirlwind, negotiating treaties, setting borders, just trying to hold things together while everything is coming apart at the seams.
And then, on top of all of that, Russia descends into this bloody civil war.
It was brutal, a devastating conflict, really. The Bolsheviks or Reds fighting against this coalition of white armies, monarchists, and even some foreign powers. It was a fight for survival, really a far cry from all that revolutionary idealism that fueled the Bolsheviks' rise to power.
So where's Stalin during all of this? I mean, he wasn't a military strategist, was he?
No, he wasn't on the front lines. He played a vital role behind the scenes. Stalin was a master organizer, a logistical wizard, really. He made sure the Red Army was supplied, functioning.
Yeah.
Think of him as the guy who kept the trains running on time. Essential,
Right.
even if it doesn't sound, glamorous.
So while others focused on the grand strategy and all of that, Stalin was focused on the nuts and bolts that kept the whole operation going. I bet that gave him quite a lot of power within the party, huh?
Exactly. This, seemingly boring logistical role allowed him to build a network of loyal officials and really solidify his position as a key figure in the Bolshevik leadership. It may not sound that exciting, but that kind of control over these practical matters can be more powerful than you'd think.
And it's during this period that his personality really starts to shine through, well, maybe darken is a better word.
Yeah, you see glimpses of his ruthlessness, that meticulous attention to detail, and just his talent for manipulating, people and situations to his advantage. Qualities that unfortunately would serve him very well later on.
Are there any interesting, I don't know, any interesting personal details that we know about from this period?
Well, this is when he meets and marries Nadezhda Aluyeva, his second wife. She actually provides this really unique perspective on his personality, both the charisma and, well, the darker, more controlling tendencies.
So the Civil War ends, the Bolsheviks win, but the country is in ruins. What's their next move?
They introduced a new economic policy, the NEP for short. It was basically a strategic retreat from, pure communism. They allowed some elements of capitalism to try and revive the devastated economy.
So a bit of a compromise, not exactly what you'd expect from a hardline communist regime.
It was a pragmatic move. I mean, it was born out of necessity.
Yeah.
And it worked. Actually, the economy did begin to recover, but of course, it also created, new challenges and contradictions.
Because, of course, nothing's ever that simple, is it?
Right. And amidst all of this, the rebuilding, the internal debates, Stalin is quietly consolidating his power. Don't forget, he's now the general secretary of the party. It might sound like a boring bureaucratic role, but it gave him control over party appointments, the flow of information. I mean, immense control.
So while everyone else is busy putting out fires, Stalin's playing the long game, positioning himself to take, ultimate control.
Precisely. And then, 1924, Lenin dies. This creates a power vacuum at the top of the Bolshevik Party, setting the stage for this power struggle of epic proportions.
I mean, the stakes couldn't be higher. This is a battle for the soul of the revolution. And Stalin, despite his relatively low profile, is right in the thick of it. So who are his main rivals in this contest for power?
Most prominent was Leon Trotsky, the charismatic war hero. I mean, he seemed like the natural successor to Lenin. But Stalin had a different kind of power, a more subtle, behind-the-scenes influence that he'd built through years of careful maneuvering.
It's almost like, a game of chess with Stalin making these calculated moves, anticipating his opponents, always staying a few steps ahead.
That's a great analogy. He understood the mechanics of power within the party better than anyone. He built alliances, isolated his opponents, and he just expertly exploited their weaknesses.
Now, didn't Lenin try to warn everyone about Stalin? I've heard something about this document called Lenin's Testament.
He did. In his final days, Lenin dictated a document outlining his concerns about the future of the party. And he did not hold back on his criticism of Stalin.
What did he say?
Well, he was worried about Stalin's personality, his rudeness, his ambition, and just his thirst for power, He even suggested that Stalin be removed as general secretary. Imagine that Lenin himself warning the party about the very man who would end up succeeding him.
Talk about foreshadowing. So how did Stalin react to this bombshell?
With cunning and deception. He initially offered to resign, playing the role of the loyal, self-effacing servant of the party.
Seems pretty shrewd. Makes him look humble, even though he's probably scheming his next move in the background.
Exactly. And it worked. Rykov, a leading Bolshevik at the time, he totally underestimated Stalin and failed to capitalize on his offer to resign. It would prove to be a fatal miscalculation.
So Stalin survives this challenge, but he's still facing, opposition from these various factions within the party, right?
Absolutely. The struggle for power is far from over at this point. He faces opposition from, Trotsky's supporters, from those who favor continuing with the NEP, and then also from hardliners who, they want to return to the more radical policies.
Must have been a tense time, a dangerous time, really, with these shifting alliances, the backstabbing, and that constant maneuvering for position. So how does Stalin manage to navigate this, treacherous landscape?
He's ruthless, pragmatic, and incredibly patient. I mean, he exploits divisions within the opposition, playing them against each other. And he's not afraid to use the the growing power of the secret police to silence his critics.
It sounds like things are, getting darker, moving away from those revolutionary ideals and towards something more
There's,
sinister.
you're starting to see the emergence of that totalitarian state that would, well, that would come to define Stalin's role. Now, while all this is happening within the party, the world outside is undergoing a massive upheaval of its own, the Great Depression.
Right, the Great Depression. So, what impact did this global economic crisis have on Stalin's rise? I mean, you wouldn't think that a crisis in the capitalist world would help a communist leader.
You might be surprised. The Depression actually played right into Stalin's hands.
Yeah.
Western capitalists, desperate for new markets, they were suddenly willing to do business with the Soviet Union.
So he was able to, I guess you could say, leverage the crisis to his advantage.
Exactly. It really strengthened his position, both within the party and on the world stage. He was seen as this strong leader, capable of navigating these turbulent times, and this newfound stability. Well, it allowed him to push forward with his most ambitious and, well, devastating policy collectivization.
This is where things take a truly dark turn, right? The forced collectivization of agriculture, the elimination of private land ownership that led to, widespread famine and suffering.
It was a brutal and tragic chapter in Soviet history. Millions of peasants were killed or deported to labor camps. And it wasn't just about, economics. Collectivization was also a way for Stalin to consolidate his control over the countryside and just crush any potential opposition there.
He's essentially willing to, sacrifice millions of lives to achieve his vision of this socialist utopia.
That's the terrifying reality of Stalin's rule.
Yeah.
He believed the ends justified the means, no matter how horrific those means might be.
It's a chilling reminder, really, of the dangers of unchecked power and the human cost of these utopian ideologies taken to their extremes.
And it really sets the stage for the next phase of his rule, the era of the Great Terror, the show trials, the Gulag system. But that, as they say, is a story for another deep dive. Welcome back to our deep dive into the making of Stalin. We've followed his journey from that rebellious youth to this cunning political operator, witnessing his ascent to the pinnacle of power in the Soviet Union. And well, as we've seen, that rise was marked by both just brilliant maneuvering and ruthless brutality.
It's a story that's, both fascinating and horrifying at the same time. As we delve into this period of collectivization, we really see the full emergence of the dictator we know from, the history books, the paranoia, the absolute control, that willingness to just sacrifice anything and everything to achieve his goals.
Yeah, you really get the sense that the revolution for Stalin wasn't just about overthrowing the Tsar and all that. It was about, remaking society,
Right.
From the ground up, no matter the cost.
Before we get into the horrors of collectivization, let's rewind a bit. I mean, Stalin was a master at setting the stage, creating this climate of, fear and suspicion that allowed him to eliminate his opponents and push through his radical policies. I mean, the Shakti trial in 1928 was a key moment in this strategy.
Absolutely. This show trial, it targeted engineers and managers in the coal industry, accusing them of, sabotage and plotting against the state. It was carefully orchestrated, this
Right.
propaganda spectacle designed to whip up public anger and create scapegoats for the country's economic problems.
So he's basically saying, look, the revolution is being undermined from within. We've got enemies lurking in the shadows.
Precisely. And it worked, brilliantly. The trial with all those, forced confessions and dramatic accusations, it created this wave of paranoia that swept across the country. It was the beginning of that whole enemy within narrative that would fuel the purges and terror of the 1930s.
Yeah. It's like something out of, 1984, right? A society where everyone is watching everyone else, afraid to speak out because they're scared of being denounced as an enemy of the state.
That's a very apt comparison.
Mm-hmm.
And this climate of fear, that sense of constant threat, it played right into Stalin's hands. It allowed him to get rid of potential rivals, really consolidate his control over the party, and just push through his radical policies with little resistance.
So collectivization wasn't just about agriculture, really. It was about, control, crushing any potential opposition, even within the party itself.
Exactly. It was about, reshaping society in his image, breaking the back of the peasantry, who he saw as, as a potential threat to his power. It was a brutal campaign. I mean, marked by violence, deportations, and widespread famine.
It's hard to even grasp the scale of The human suffering that was
Yeah.
inflicted during this period. I mean, millions died, families were torn apart, entire communities were just wiped out.
It was a horrific chapter in Soviet history, and it's important to remember that this wasn't just a result of incompetence or economic miscalculations. It was a deliberate policy, really driven by Stalin's ideological convictions and his ruthless pursuit of power.
And this is also, when we see the emergence of that gulag system, this vast network of forced labor camps that would become, well, synonymous with Soviet repression.
The Gulag system was a key tool of Stalin's terror. It allowed him to eliminate anyone perceived as a threat, real or imagined, and it provided a source of cheap labor for his ambitious industrialization plans.
It's unbelievable to think that this whole system of this thing designed to just crush any dissent was being built at the same time that the West was reeling from, the Great Depression. I mean, talk about two very different responses to crisis.
It's a stark contrast, really highlighting the fundamental differences between the Soviet Union and the Western democracies. And even within the Soviet leadership, there was some opposition to Stalin's policies.
Sure.
Figures like Bukharin and Rykov, both prominent Bolsheviks, they expressed concerns about the pace and the brutality of collectivization.
I mean, they must have known they were, playing with fire by challenging Stalin. So how did he react?
He was ruthless in
Mm.
crushing any dissent. Bukharin, once a close ally, he was denounced as a traitor, expelled from the party, and eventually executed in one of those, infamous show trials. Rykov met a similar fate.
So by the early 1930s, it seems like Stalin was firmly in control. He'd consolidated his power, eliminated his rivals, and really embarked on this, radical transformation of Soviet society. I mean, the country was his to mold, according to his vision, no matter the cost.
Exactly. I mean, he had become the embodiment of the revolution, the ultimate arbiter of its meaning and its direction. And anyone who dared to question his interpretation or his methods, well, they were ruthlessly eliminated.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what are the key takeaways here? I mean, what can we learn from this complex and often disturbing story?
Well, I think it's crucial to understand that that interplay of personality and historical circumstances. Stalin was undoubtedly a product of his time. A ruthless, ambitious figure who thrived in this chaotic and violent era. But he also, shaped that era. His choices, his policies, his brutal methods, they all left this indelible mark on the Soviet Union and, well, the world.
It's a chilling reminder, really, of the dangers of unchecked power and the human capacity for both good and evil.
Absolutely. And it leaves us with this question that historians are still debating. Was Stalin's rise inevitable? I mean, was he simply a product of historical forces? Or did his unique personality and his choices play a decisive role in, shaping his destiny and the fate of millions?
That's certainly something for us all to ponder as we reflect on this deep dive into Stalin's world, a world of revolution, terror, and, well, ultimately absolute power.